and I do want to make sure everyone knows that we do have that new interview series of videos coming out, which is basically something that is not live stream, but we're going to post it on IGTV on We Are Creative Cog. So if anyone would like to pay attention to that and kind of go through December, Lee Flayton is going to be our first interview series, and we'll release those on Friday. So one will be coming out, the first one tomorrow. You can go check out the preview here after the live stream tonight on We Are Creative Cog. But I guess that inspired this essay or this writing that you're going to be reading for us today.
Mm-hmm. Well, talking with you and Rona just about writing and you know, the whole many years I've been at this, so I started thinking a lot about all kinds of stuff. So that's how I came up with the Not Dead Poet Society that I'll be reading, which is not a poem and not a song, but it's a personal essay. And yeah. So thank you.
All right, give it up for Lee Flayton, everybody.
Thanks, Donnie, and Rona somewhere. Okay, so this is called the Not Dead Poet Society. I remember the day I decided to be a writer. I was 6 or 7, and I was sitting at my sister's desk in her bedroom. The desk was painted white with matching vertical shelves attached to it, and although the setup was utterly unremarkable, I was happy there because her room was in the farthest corner of the house, away from everyone and everything. So, before I even understood the significance of Virginia Woolf's time-honored words, I knew instinctively that I wanted a room of one's own. Still, I don't know where the idea to become a writer came from, but a couple of years later, I wrote a story that my local librarian kindly put in a folder and placed on the bookshelf, along with an author card for the card catalog that I stalked for years, though it wasn't until high school that I believed I really could be one. While reading short stories by Southern Gothic writers, my English teacher nearly got the vapors when introducing us to Carson McCullers, who at that moment became my favorite writer despite the fact that I hadn't read a word she'd written. When Mr. Martinson breathlessly described her as someone who had died far too young and oh so tragically, I was hooked and unable to resist the romance of all those tubercular, neurasthenic, and alcoholic literary heroes I was discovering and devouring. They seemed to live the most extraordinary lives, and when I saw the movie Dead Poets Society a couple years later, I decided that I too would carpe diem and make my life extraordinary. In college, I majored in something called English Writing Arts with a concentration in poetry, so naturally I saw nothing but fame and fortune in my future. I was almost right. During my senior year, a professor submitted one of my poems to the Academy of American Poets, and I split the $100 prize with a fellow student. I remember the 20-year-old me kicking back, seeing nothing but blue sky ahead and thinking, this is so easy. I had no idea that those $50 would be the last I would earn as a writer for nearly a decade, which was a good thing in retrospect because that quest powered me through those ensuing salad days, during which I wrote all kinds of shitty would-be novels, TV shows, and short stories, and frustrated when I still hadn't been discovered, I tearfully asked my parents to support me so I could really write, which made them crack up, then serve up a hard no. I was crushed. All I wanted was to be a modern-day it girl, lounging in cafes along the Saint-Germain-des-Prés, or at least cheesy Third Avenue in Manhattan, where I shared a dorm-like apartment with friends, writing by day and carousing with all manner of iconoclasts by night. Was that too much to ask? Fortunately, I possessed just the right mix of hubris, moxie, and 20-something pretension to keep me going, egged on by all those sullen, sexy types who read Dostoevsky in East Village bars solo on Friday nights. By day, I worked as an assistant in book publishing, and then I applied for a job at a prestigious poetry center. I shudder to this day when I remember the interview, during which I was asked who my favorite contemporary poets were. I didn't really know any because I'd only studied dead poets in college, so I replied, I prefer writing my own poems over reading other poets. I didn't land that one. However, I soon got a job as a nanny slash research assistant to a well-known journalist and his wife, who is arguably the top literary agent in the world. And yes, I had the pluck of youth required to ask her to read the novel I had just banged out in the maid's room I occupied in their Classic 6 apartment. I'll never forget what she said after she'd read at least some of my opus, which, mercifully, has been lost to time. "You'll be a writer one day," she said, "but first you have to write through yourself." What? I was stunned. You mean she wasn't going to sign me as a client on the spot? Didn't she know I was America's next literary darling, living right there under her roof? Yet here she was telling me I had to write through myself. What did that even mean? It sure didn't sound like carpe diem, and I was angry and confused. And when she left a few days later to accompany one of her authors to Oslo to accept the Nobel Prize for Literature, I decided that I'd show her. I'd abandon my novel and write an Oscar-winning screenplay instead. That ought to do it. It didn't. And over the years, I've written books that have never been published, movies that haven't been made, and plays that have yet to be produced. In nearly the 3 decades that I've been at this, I've yet to get that ever elusive but still highly anticipated big break. So although my childhood dream to make my living as a writer has not yet materialized, it sure has supported me. Through the countless disappointments and breakups and hard days we all experience, I have turned to writing to cope and to understand more about myself and the world around me. Writing, which to me is something like faith, has never let me down. Knowing this has served me well during my metamorphosis from young woman in a hurry into an actual writer. And now, with the pandemic forcing so many of us to put our dreams on hold, to take a collective break and more than just a few deep breaths, it's okay. I know this place. I've lived here a long time, and I know how lucky I am to have this thing that demands so much solitary patience and always sees me through. In fact, it was just the beginning of this year, this maddening and unimaginable year, that I began writing these essays. First as a lark for open mic nights, thank you, Donnie and Rona, and now for me, to keep me going, to keep trying and to keep writing through myself, now that I know what that means. And also because of the specter of my own mortality. Because if I were to die now, what would I have to show for all of these words? What would remain of the thousands upon thousands of hours I've spent working alone, and the attendant ecstasies and disappointments and relentless rejections that come with this way of life? What would be left of me other than the corpse of yet another unextraordinary and dead former poetry major? Now, at least, and for what they're worth, there would be the essays, proof that I did what I set out to do in my sister's childhood bedroom all those years ago. And the understanding that, like anything that really matters in this life, it's the doing of the thing itself, not the result, that matters most. It's doing the writing in all of its aspects and every one of its hardships that counts. And that's enough. And that's it. And there's the whistle. I love the Donnie whistle. That's why I do this. I do this for the Donnie whistle. I'm telling you.
That's, I was going to say,